Are you a person that experienced some big feelings while watching a movie about a character that had big feelings? If so, then you're going to want to watch and check out the rest of this video, which is reviewing Pixar/Disney's latest feature film, Turning Red, featuring my friend Jen Hurler. So welcome to a relatively impromptu episode of Simplyrobotix, the podcast, about the recent release Pixar Disney film Turning Red. It was a film that I watched with no intention of doing a podcast about, because I was like, I didn't want to make that commitment in case there was like a musical moment in here, and then now I've cursed myself again. So I watched it. I had a great time. I told the Twitterverse that was it. That's all I'm saying on this. And then I got a couple DMs and a text message, different social media platforms like, oh, I really like Turning Red. Can't wait to see what you have to say about it. And I was like, here's my tweet where I said I wasn't going to say anything. But then after I sent that to like the third person, I was like, dang, maybe I do have to do something. So I was like, well, I don't want to do it by myself. So I called on no stranger to this show at this point, Jen Hurler. Jen Hurler has been on all of them, like even before I figured out I had a season. But her first episode was like my third episode of the show, just about her being in grad school. And then she came on again to talk about Avatar: The Last Airbender. And then did you come on for What If or no?
I didn't. I wanted to, but I was like, how much are you going to bug her?
Oh, well, you could have, because in my brain you did. But okay. So I thought you were on What If. What If we'll have a season 2? So Jen will come on
for season 2, especially if
yeah, Jen will come on for season 2. So anyways, Jen Hurler is here with me today, which also I feel like is a great person to talk about this movie with, because Jen herself is such a fangirl, I feel like, in so many capacities and facets. So I'm sure, much like me, you could relate to May in this movie. So just real short, the movie was directed by Domi Shi. It's an hour and 40 minutes long. This is really important information that I found out just before recording this, that she was born in 87. So that makes her also a millennial. She's just from Canada. So when I was watching the film, I was feeling like this is too dialed in. And I was thinking, I guess I never even really seen her. Like, I may have seen her, but not actually processed the individual I was looking at. So I definitely thought she was like early 40s or like mid 40s or something.
I'm excited for her.
No, I was like, there's just no way, you know? And then so seeing that she was in 87, she's just essentially 2 years older than us. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh my God. And this is her first like feature film directorial debut. That's so huge, because that's something that I feel like, one, if you're a woman, one, if you're just like not, well, she's an animator, right? But anyways, if you're just like a woman, it just feels like that's something you can't really achieve until you are in your mid 40s. Yeah. So that's why I just assumed that, right? Even with her short, I don't know why I just never paid attention to like, she's youthful, like no offense to other people, and she's probably closer to my proximity than I like realized. But I feel like that kind of, added fuel or whatever to my own career ambitions, because I'm like, oh my gosh, she's like within arm's distance,
like contemporary,
yeah, like literally. And if she can do that, then like maybe I don't have to wait until I'm 60 to like
what a concept.
be up there, like, you know. Yeah. So anywho, it's an American film. Jen, what was your first impression when you watched it? Also, did you watch it more than once yet?
I watched it twice. And It held up. Not that I didn't think it would. Honestly, I was more scared about like the trailers and stuff, because it was like building up like my dream childhood movie. And then I was scared it wasn't going to live up to it. And then to be fair, the hype on Twitter was a lot, especially obviously after it came out. And I feel like there's often like a lot of backlash when, something gets hyped up a lot and people unironically love something and very earnestly love something, that there's always like detractors. But for me, it's like very much like held up, and it's like, I adored it. I was smiling like dopey smile the whole time I was watching it for the first time. I related to it so much, and it was like, it's such a gift to have that. Yeah. To have like a film directed by someone close to our age, And that felt like it was really her film. Like it wasn't like a film by committee. It wasn't some like 50-year-old white dude who is talking about being a dad, something like, not that, there's just still relatable, but like this was like so focused. And because it was so focused, it's like the more, I don't know, like Bong Joon-ho once said something about like, the universal is like the most relatable, like something along those lines. And it's like, this is so it for me.
Yeah. I feel like when I first watched it, I watched it with my cousins so it's like 3 millennials and a Gen Z. Like that's even the name of one of our group chats. And the Gen Z cousin, like she felt not so distant or removed from the movie because she saw us going through all the things. So it was for her just pretty entertaining seeing it like on a screen. But I remember like Monday coming back to work, and I was like, yeah, I saw Turning Red. And they were like, oh, how was it? And if you think about it, these are all people that like, they were starting their careers on like the first Toy Story or something like that. Like, these are people who were like in college when Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out, right? So just to give some proximity to like the age difference. So I'm here like, well, it's about a girl who was 13 in 2002. And like my mind exploded because I was like, I was 13 in 2002. And I'm here like, yes, I was that obsessed of like Backstreet Boys and like B2K and like watching TRL and all these music video shows. And like, I don't think I was obsessively drawing them in particular, but I also had like a little sketchbook that like I kept to myself with like my writings and whatever. And I was the one that had the posters, like the pop culture. And then there's two, because there's like pop culture and then there's like urban culture. So I had the diaspora of like pop people all on my bedroom wall. So I was like, yes, I am completely here for this. But they were like, I'm so happy like you enjoyed it. And I was just like, no, my mind was going through so many things because now we're like, when we were growing up, we were so used to seeing movies, I guess, about like the 70s and the 80s. And then now we're going to start seeing movies about like the 2000s.
Yeah.
And we can be like, well, we were alive for that actually.
Yeah.
And like, that's not accurate or whatever. Like, how some stores, they're bringing back like velour tracksuits and you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah. It's like,
but also I want a pair because I miss that.
Those were comfy and yeah.
Yeah. So there's like some of that going on. Like we have now aged to the point where we're telling our own stories and our own experiences.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
No, I said we're the subject matter.
Yeah. And it's just like, I wasn't ready for that. So I feel like I was having so many moments watching the film and after. But yeah, watching it the second time, which was just literally this morning, I felt so good. Like there's a future episode coming out where I talk more in depth about me watching Akira for the first time, which I was texting you watching Akira because, but I feel like this is a much better way to start off a weekend morning than Akira.
I wish like you had filmed yourself watching it. I would watch the hell out of that. Like
it was very like, no, this can't be right. And it's like, you know what? I'm starting my morning over. That's it.
So good.
But yeah, so the plot, like, oh no, I want you to actually, because you're like Jen Hurler, Animation Complex. Can you tell people who may not have checked it out yet, may have missed the trailer for some reason, one way or another, just the plot simply of Turning Red?
Yeah, I mean, it's I want to say it's a classic coming of age story, but considering the number of like girl-centered coming of age stories we've had is like -3, I'm like, it might be a little hard for some people to imagine. But it's about this girl who discovers that her family has a gift/curse that when she kind of loses control of her emotions, she turns into a red panda. And this is all kind of, lining up with puberty, bit of an allegory. And it's about her having to kind of understand herself and her emotions and who she wants to be compared to who her family wants her to stay as and who her family expects her to be. And yeah, without like giving away big plot moments and whatnot, it's like her coming into her own and finding the support of her friends to kind of stand up to her parents a little bit and like find her own footing. I feel like that's like the broadest I can give you without like
no, that is great
stuff.
And I will say that's as much of the non-spoiler talk that's going to happen. Yeah. So after, like, this is the moment now we're going to start talking about spoiler stuff. How'd you feel about not any, but all of the characters, and if any characters really stood out to you besides May?
I mean, Abby, obviously. She's like the cutest little like gremlin child. Like, oh, I loved her so much. Part of it, I was obviously like, her expressions, like, and just all the expressions here. I know we'll like probably talk about that like more specifically, but
no, talk about it now.
Oh, but it was just like the way that the characters in this film emoted. You know, they harken back to so many like classic anime and just like classic like manga panels and whatnot, and like certain the way that the mouth shapes were and whatnot. And like her, they just clearly pushed even more than the other three. I guess May as well was, she was pushed a lot. But like Abby stood out for me just because she was so straightforward and so like honest. Like I never thought I'd hear, at one point they're talking about like, oh, my mom called it stripper music, and she's like,
I know
that, and I was like,
I know.
I was like, bless this child. Like, yes, and like, yeah, they were talking about a boy, and they were like, oh, he's so sexy, and he's like just like this trash like little human child, and.
Yeah, wasn't he like 16?
Yeah, and he had like the dark like under eye bags, and I don't know, it was so funny. Like it was just so relatable. But she stood out. I mean, all of them were just so cute because they were all like, I feel like they're all like facets of like of everybody. And it was just like the friend group is always so key in these coming of age films. And it usually is a group of four. So it's like it was fun because they were all like just so supportive and so open with each other, and it was like so refreshing to see that there wasn't any like, I feel like when like white dudes write about girls, it's like there's always like the backstabbing one, or they talk about each other behind their backs, and it's all this kind of mean girls nonsense. And it's like there was a little bit of that growing up, but for the most part, like you just wanted someone who accepted you.
Yeah. And I feel like even though we may have experienced a lot of that mean girl stuff, just having that core group, is just, to a certain extent, it can almost just overshadow those experiences, not to negate them, but just thinking about how pivotal, like, your girl group, your friends were back in, like, late elementary school, definitely throughout junior high and starting high school. It's like, I think they really captured the positives of those girl groups, how reaffirming they can be, and the stuff with the mothers and the parents, and just like, chill out, girl, like, get a grasp on your emotions. Like, it's okay, trying to like sometimes bring one person in the group back down.
And I did love too.
Yeah, I loved it so much. I'm sorry?
Oh no, I was gonna say, I love too, like the scene where, it's like what calmed her down was her friends.
I know.
And it was
and she liked her mom.
Yeah, and I love that. Like, it was kind of interesting that they never really tied up that. Like, she never, I thought that was going to be, like, the big, like, sad climax of her being like, I wasn't you, I lied, and that actually never was addressed. And I really like that because I feel like that's part of growing up is, like, kind of knowing and accepting that the more you grow, the further you get from your parents, and the more that hurts them. And, like, they're proud of you, and that's expected, but it's still painful. And it's, like, living with that duality was like really nice to see in like a small way in this film. It's like,
so you talked a little bit too about like the expressions, and I'll segue that into the animation style. Did you watch the Embrace the Panda doc?
Yeah, I did. And like,
okay, I've tried to watch as much this morning before this. So Domi definitely pointed out, as you said, like the anime references and Sailor Moon, and we all know I'm not that into anime, but I was a stan for Sailor Moon. So I did catch some of that with like the eyes and the twinkles and all that sort of stuff. But how do you feel about the animation style compared to some of Pixar's previous work?
Oh, I loved it. I think Luca did a lot of the groundwork for this film for sure. In terms of like the rigging and the animation style. I think this was like Luca plus. And again, and that's like, that's a compliment, because Luca was another Pixar film recently that really did feel like more of like an auteur. Like it had like a clear point of view from one person. And it was a very personal story as well. And Yeah, so for me, this was just like taking all of those things that like we loved growing up. And again, I feel like Damishi and I could definitely be like good friends just based on the groundwork of like this film of just like, these are all her references and these are the same things for me. You know, even just like the turning into the red panda is there's an anime called Ranma. And the character turns into a boy, like they flip genders. It's very binary and kind of outdated, but it's fine. But then like there's another character that like is a panda. But yeah, it was just like all these different things that I could tell like she pulled into it. And to see that reflected in the art direction and the character animation and the really pushing the expressions and stuff, it was like so refreshing. To see that welcome, because I feel like too, like a thing about like I think our generation that she probably heard too in like art school was like there was this big push of discouraging kids from like drawing anime style using air quotes here, and now we're seeing all of this stuff that like just completely disproves that, and I feel like we're all a little bitter because we're just like everyone's making the things that they loved, like influencing it, like the amount of Akira like bike homages.
I saw that.
Yeah,
I saw that. Like it was like a legit 2.5 minutes worth of that motorcycle slide.
Yeah, and I feel like to be fair, like it has definitely taken a life of its own, but it's just like you still have to appreciate that like branch of animation to like be like I'm going to put this in here. Yeah, I don't know. It just was like all these things that I feel like so many of us growing up were made fun of about, like were celebrated. And that was really nice for me.
Yeah, I agree. I would say too, just going back to like Pixar's animation style, I saw a tweet just saying that like we're in like a new era of Pixar with their last 4 movies, Onward, Soul, Luca, and Turning Red. And I know I said respectfully, I ignore Onward.
I still haven't seen it. I like just, yeah.
But for me, like the last 3 were definitely, I can see what they were getting at with Onward, but the way that you said that, like and really with Luca and Turning Red even more so than Soul, like you can tell it's like a specific voice that's telling a very unique and particular and definite story. Like Luca can, to a certain extent, that is just that small Italian town or whatever, and that's their thing. And I'm sure if you tried to pick up that story and put it in a different country, small town, it just wouldn't be the same because it's so nuanced to like the location. And for the same thing with Turning Red, it's very nuanced to like a Canadian, Chinese, first whatever born or like
this particular
whatever
time. Yeah.
And I even found myself like relating to some of that, and I know you can too, as just being like first gen American or just having immigrant parents and just navigating that and wanting to like just be their pride and joy, and the perfectionism which leads to imposter syndrome later, and like do we ever get over that stuff? Ooh, no. But like seeing her work and process through some of that. Like I remember there were moments she was calling herself like the adult that I am. And it's like, girl, you were 13.
Yes. 13.
Not even like 17 teenager being adult. She's like, okay, I'm a teen now. Time to take on my responsibilities.
Oh my God, stop. It reminds me, I remember seeing like a tweet or something about The Little Mermaid, and it's like, you've become an actual adult when you like agree with the dad. Because like there's a line in that where she's just like, Daddy, I'm 16, where she's like, I'm an adult, and he's just like, bitch. And I'm like, bitch, like I used to be like Team Ariel, like go for it, live your dreams, and now I'm like, you're 16, sweetie. Like yeah. So I want to talk too about just like the visual style of Turning Red, because it's so, at moments it reminds me of like Lisa Frank. I feel like it doesn't always go there, but I feel like it's definitely like cohesive of that. And there was just this moment where like May, I think she had just turned, or she's about to turn into the panda, and they show like her eyeball and the iris. And I was just looking at like the brushstrokes and the texture of the color of it. And I was like, that's so satisfying because so often I feel like back in art school, we were trying to achieve that whole natural looking like eye texture to be like very technical for this moment. But seeing how they went
after it with such a more like raw, brushstrokey appeal and not some sort of very soft, blended, smoothed out gradient, for me was just very satisfying.
Yeah.
Like, I could appreciate that one frame.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree. I think it's nice again, like with Luca and Turning Red, like to see like the shift, because I feel like there was a point where some of the Pixar films were like there are shots in The Good Dinosaur where if you take out the character, there's some like establishing shots, some environmental like cutaways that just look like a photo sometimes. Like Katana, like lighting and render like that combo is like so legit for like photoreal. And I feel like that carried on a little bit even through Soul, where like the characters were a little more caricatured, but like Queens was like felt very like real and realistic. And then you get these softer characters and these like rounded worlds, and like, the color palette everything just was like a little bit more cartoony, but still grounded. And like, it was so refreshing. And the colors in this, it's like, I haven't cared about getting like an art book in a while, to be honest. And this one, I'm like,
I was just thinking that literally as you're talking.
Yeah.
I was like, this is going to be the art book.
Yeah. I'm kind of like, I don't even know what my last art book is that I've bought, because I just like kind of stopped for a while. And now I'm like, I really want this one because I want to see like the color scripts for this.
And surprisingly, they did release, wasn't it like free online, the Encanto?
Yeah, a couple of them were.
And I just wasn't that interested in it. Mm-hmm. And I can still appreciate and respect the movie for what it was. But this movie just really felt like it. And I'm like, I want more of this. Mm-hmm. I almost would even be okay with just like a short or something about the aunts, or like just a little bit more of Fort Town. Like when I was watching it today, and I was like, I missed the post-credit scene the first time I watched it. And I also forgot to like look for people's names, because like, oh, people I know worked on this. Yeah. So I'm watching it. I'm like, I'm really enjoying Fort Town. So I'm like, there's a soundtrack. I want more of their music. Yeah. I want. I feel like
it's silly not to like do more. But yeah, who knows? Like,
who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? We need more.
Yeah. The director gets it doesn't mean everyone above her gets it.
Yeah. So how do you feel about the story execution overall? Especially with you being a writer.
No, I mean, I honestly like have no notes in terms of like the story. Again, I liked that. Like, the one thing I really caught was like they never really addressed that like moment, that like lie she told her mom. And I feel like that's a thing that like Cinema Sins would like ding, kind of shit. But it's like, no, like that was great and that's so accurate. I know Domishi like co-wrote it, I believe. I think that must help a lot. I don't know. She's a story artist, so I assume she probably like boarded or did maybe like some storybook moments, or like I don't know how much of it she actually boarded too. But for me with animation, like I cannot tell you how much I wish more like people like wrote the same thing and boarded a bit too. Like I always remember when we went to that. Actually, I don't know if you were at that same one as me, but like when Nora Twomey was like bringing the breadwinner around.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and she talked about how they had like one person storyboard at the entire film for the first pass, and how like even just something like that is like so crucial to like, again, there being a consistent point of view, and how much that gets lost in a big studio where it's like you have several artists touching the same sequence, over so much time, and so much gets lost. And it felt like this, like it just has such a clear point of view. It just feels like, I don't know how many drafts, how many passes, how many reels they went through, but it feels like they like had those bones so solidly from a very early point, and then they just kept refining it. And like, yeah, I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah, they said they went through 6 reels.
Okay, that's not bad.
Yeah, well, I don't know how much is normal.
I feel like I feel like at least like when we were at Blue Sky, I feel like the goal was like every like 3 months, 4 months, you try to get a reel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, like, how many times did it actually happen? Other.
That's also just a little bit stressful. Just as soon as you're finished one set, it's like, okay, time to do it again.
Literally rip it apart and like put it back together. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel. Oh wait, no. My follow-up question was just like, how Pixar has that very like known about story structure in terms of like, in the beginning there was this, and then this happened, and then this happened, and right. So how did you feel about, or were you as aware of that as you're watching it, or were you able to step back?
No, I was like totally immersed in this because, again, I think it is like one of the few times that I've been able to like so closely relate to characters that I just like lost myself in it a bit.
Yeah.
Which like, yeah, it doesn't happen. Like growing up, all of my favorite characters were boys and I remember like always feeling like boys have more fun because all of my favorite characters that went on all the fun adventures were boys. Yeah, and it's like a weird thing, like then to watch this and like, because I feel like too, like growing up, I rejected a lot of like really feminine things, and I feel like even just like the way they balanced like them just like being young girls and then like them like, you know, getting interested in boys and getting interested in like other people was like also just like played out like so normally, and like naturally, and it's like, yeah, it's not weird, but everybody I know felt weird about it because people are so weird about girls going through puberty.
Yeah. I agree with you too. Like just being so immersed in it that like enough of the feature films that I end up reviewing, I feel like it's so clear when you're like getting into the different acts of the movie and like, okay, well, this is going to be the moment. And then everything is going to then, you know, the main character is going to have their whatever.
Yeah.
Their realization, they're going to change their ways, or they're going to like finally overcome whatever adversity it is so that they can get what they want. I feel like that has always stood out so much more to me, probably because of some of that disconnect.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I try to watch things sometimes just for like actual enjoyment and sometimes to be more objective. But yeah, I had turned off the objective brain for this because I was like, again, I was like, I'm tired of musicals or whatever. I'm just going to try this. This is my last try. And I was like, oh, this was great. Yeah. This was fun. And like the music was there as an aid, but it wasn't like, it wasn't being like, you know, sung to music and I'm forced to sing along now or whatever. And
yeah,
I'm so happy.
I think too, like watching this, I didn't know how big the stakes were going to get too. So there were times where I'd be like, not even like analyzing, but just like, oh, like, are they going to find out? Like when they started taking more risks at school with like showing the panda off, I was like, okay, well, they have flip phones, but they still have cameras. You know, where it was like, is this going to be a thing? Like, how much are people going to know? Is that going to be a huge plot point? You know, like, I feel like sometimes these movies can like take just the most bizarre turns in like the, you know, later second act and third act. And yeah, there were so many moments where I just was like, I don't know exactly, like, I think I know where they're going to go with this, you know, where I was like, not even sure if they were ever going to get to the concert.
Right.
You know, like little stuff like that where I was like, oh, is this going to happen? And I found I just was like sitting back and just like letting it happen instead of like trying to like piece it together myself. Like it just was like more casually like, oh man, are they going to get to the concert? Like instead of like, well, you know, they set this up and then like this, it would make sense if this paid off, but then like also they could be like a twist, you know, whatever. Like none of that was happening.
Do you want to take us through some of your memorable moments?
Oh, I mean, I feel like everybody's memorable moment was the scene with the pads.
Oh,
I feel like
when she's at home or when the mom brings it to school?
When she's at home and the mom just shows up with like the hot water bottle and the pads and like the ibuprofen. Oh my God. I remember like that was so fun. Like the week it came out, just like being on Twitter.
Yes.
Because it was just like all the animation ladies and like people I follow who were just like, yes, like, holy crap, this is such like a minor thing. But it's like someone had to like, model that like, you know, box, whatever. But like, I'm like, someone had to like design that like period packaging. In like Pixar's graphic design department. Love that for us. But just like the way it was so normal, like, again, I feel like it, not to keep bringing that up like so many people are, but it is like such a weird thing that happens to like 50% of the population. And it's such a taboo thing. And
right.
The way people treat it, like it's like not a thing to talk about around children when it's like it happens to children.
Exactly.
You know, it's like there's a lot of stuff like that, you know, and it's just like, cool, this happens to real children. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I actually want to spend a moment on that because I mean, I don't know about you, but like, I found out about periods like 4 days before I got mine.
Oh my God, really?
I am not joking.
Wow.
I learned about it on Monday, and by like Thursday or Friday, I was bawling my eyes out in school because I thought, I don't want to be a woman.
Yeah, like everybody I know was just like, this sucks. Like, I do not want to be a girl.
No, it was like, I just knew, like, I'm an adult now. This is it. Yeah. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I learned about it in Girl Scouts. So I was like, what if I didn't go to Girl Scouts? Yeah. I would have thought I was dying at school because my mom didn't have that conversation with me. I was in 5th grade, so it's important. And I was seeing the conversations too about like how people were upset that this is a kid's movie and they're talking about it. But literally, I was 10. I was a whole kid in 5th grade, didn't make it to junior high yet. And like, my mom thought she just had more time, much like May's mom, to have that conversation with me. Yeah. And like, my mom also came out with her own care package. And like, I didn't go to school. I got like McDonald's and chocolate. And I was like, this is great. But like, also, I don't want to be an adult. But, you know, to help to try and make that like a not so horrible memory for me, you know? And so seeing that moment with May and May's mom, I was just like, this is so important because also like going forward, and especially with the way like gender and stuff keeps evolving and we're all like getting more comfortable with like not just being like there's just 2 genders. So just like parents of kids with uteruses, this can help bring about that conversation because I can imagine it's just like awkward. Like no one, like our moms didn't really have the conversation either. Yeah. You know? So like now they're like, how do I have it? I just think it's going to be handled in school. Yeah. It's also, like, thank God for Girl Scouts.
Yeah. It's also annoying too because it's like, I remember in my school, they split us into like boys and girls. And I'm thinking, like, boys should learn about this too. Like, I feel like all the people who are like, my sons asked me about pads. And I'm like, cool, your sons should know that this happens to probably a lot of their friends in the future. And like, it's not weird and it's not something they should like make fun of.
Right. Because if boys can be educated on that, then they wouldn't be lame if a girl like bleeds through her whatever at school. And now, you know, it's like... it's already too much for the girl. Like, the amount of times I would have turned into a freaking panda.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh God. I would have like leveled my school. Yeah. For me, it was awkward too because I went to Catholic school.
I see.
Which like I'm not Catholic anymore, and I frankly kind of resent that experience for me personally because it made me so weird about like sex and like my sexuality and like gender and whatnot. And part of it was like, you know, I learned my sex ed was it was like abstinence only. And then it was also like, very like technical, like, none of the emotional stuff was in there. So the period, like, it just sounded like this thing that I'm like, that can't happen to a human. Like you're just walking and then just like blood comes out of you. And like, I'm like, that's a joke, you know?
And you don't die and you're supposed to just continue on.
Yeah. Like normal. And then I remember I like kind of not lucked out, like, but it happened to one of my friends. Like she got it at school and it like leaked through, like she was sitting and then it leaked through her skirt, her uniform. And she was like way more level headed than the rest of us. She like called the teacher over who was a woman and she like whispered it and told her. And then it was thankfully like the end of the day. And then everybody, like she dismissed everybody and like made all the boys leave, which, you know, was smart for that moment. And then a couple of us stayed behind because like we like wanted to make sure she was okay. And then like you know, they explained what happened. And then like, you know, we kind of tied, you know, a sweater around her and whatever. And I remember going home and asking my mom, like, what happened to her? And being like, what? Like, this is going to happen to me? You know, it's just like the horror. And I just remember when I got it, it was like, I was so upset. Like, it's so upsetting. And I remember like in the future, I had another friend who she got it and I was a couple years older and same thing where she's just like, I don't want to be a girl. Like, I don't want to be an adult. You know, it was all this. And I'm like, I totally get it. And there's like nothing for us to, there was like nothing for us to cling on to like hope in terms of like becoming a woman. Like, there just wasn't stuff available to be like, well, like, you know, look at this character, look at this story. And like, yeah. And I'm like, I get why so many of my friends were like, I don't want to be a girl anymore.
That's all you know. Like, oh, well, you're a woman now. Well, I don't want to be.
Yeah.
Make it stop. Yeah. Another small thing I wanted to bring out was that May, right, wears glasses. So after her parents find out that she has her panda or whatever that is, and they take everything out of her room, and she's like on the mattress on the floor, and she hands her dad her glasses, and then she lays down. And I was like, oh, I also feel seen on another level, because there's some nuanced things that we've talked about in animation, like, for instance, women wearing heeled shoes. They should take off their shoes when they start running.
Yeah.
You know, we saw that in Kanto, actually. Mm-hmm. Mirabel does that. And so for me, this was like another nuanced thing. Is like, yeah, you have to take off your glasses and either hand them over to someone responsible or put them down somewhere safely. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, I'm very happy to see that. That's just it. Just a small personal win for me.
Oh, yeah, no, I love that the one girl had braces, like,
yes,
you know, and she didn't get teased about it, because it was like, I mean, it was pretty, like, rare back then, but also it was becoming a lot more common.
And the popular boy, too, he also had a couple in the front.
Yeah.
Tyler?
Oh, yeah, the one who, like, joined their friend group.
Yes. Another thing that I found relatable was May's presentation to C4 Town. Have you ever done something like that?
Yeah, like, for sure. Like, I wanted a dog. Like, the research that I would present in terms of which breed we should get and, like, how much stuff would cost, like, skimming PetSmart website and being like, see, it would only cost this much. Like, yeah.
Yeah, now that you said that, I've done something similar because I was trying to get a hamster. Mm-hmm. And my mom was heavily against all rodents, so no. And I also remember writing a paper promising to, like, let's just say do chores or something like that for a pair of sneakers that I really, really wanted. And I found the letter in shuffling things around, and I was like, in 6th grade. And I was like, this is why I need these sneakers. And I just so wanted, like, some pair of, and you know what? It's actually kind of funny in hindsight now, because those sneakers are very similar to, like, the sneakers Miles Morales wears. But I had no knowledge or awareness of Miles Morales in 6th grade.
Yeah.
But I really, really wanted those. And I got them. I think just because of the effort I put in. I don't know how much my mom believed I was going to do this stuff.
Yeah.
But I was, like, really trying to sell it to her.
That's so cute.
Yeah. So some just random things I wanted to point out as well is that, like, at around the 38 to 40 minute mark, May's grandmother called because she's in Florida and she caught wind that, like, May's been out here in her panda body acting crazy. And she's like, I'm coming up to Toronto and I'm shutting this thing down because your mom can't do it by herself. So I did not realize that grandma had a scar on her eyebrow, literally until like after the failed ritual where the mom and everyone's in the panda spirit world. And mom's like, I hurt her. And I was like, huh? I was like, what? Like, how did I make it so far into the movie? Grandma's face was there. Rewatching it today, I'm like, look at all the moments you can see this scar.
Yeah,
and I was completely oblivious to it until, like, the last, like, 20 minutes of the movie.
Oh my gosh, Monique.
I don't know. So I was like, wow. So also what I noticed in the second watch was just that at the concert, everyone's using, like, disposable cameras. Mm-hmm. And I really love that because I was thinking of getting one just for kicks and giggles. Yeah. And, you know, I don't even know where you get them developed anymore. Like, do you mail it or something? I don't know.
CVS is maybe some CVSs still do it, but
something. But that was pretty much it for me. Do you have any other final things?
Going off of what you were saying about, like, the grandma, like, the sound that came out of my body when the grandma called and then the husband picked up the phone and then he's like, oh, your mom called. And then May's mom was just like, I'm not here. I was like, for me, like, that generational lack of self-awareness, like, destroyed me because you know, like my mom is the same way with her mom. My mom is like, oh, her mom calls and she's just like, oh, I don't want to talk to her now. I'll call her later. And then my dad has to be like, bitch, you need to call your mom. But then of course with me, it's like, she does not see that, like, you know, that same thing. And because she's like, well, how could you feel that way about me? It's me, you know? And it's like, we're all a little, you know, like head blind to ourselves, I guess. But yeah, that part had me shrieking because
that's hilarious.
That was like my family in a nutshell. Oh my God. Like I still, like that part just kills me. But like, that's my own problem with my mom. Like, that's like the thing right now, I guess, with like Disney Pixar. It's just like all this family drama, like with Coco and Kanto and this, and even Luca again. It's like, it's all this like family growing pains.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. Again, like I said, I think, you know, adults, parents can really use it to open conversations with their kids if they're able to see it like that, you know? And for kids, it's just really, I mean, I did love my princess movies and like the animal sing-along movies of like, you know, the 90s and whatever before that, all that's, you know, classic Disney stuff. But I mean, I feel like all this stuff needs to happen, you know, and they occupy an appropriate space in entertainment, which is just kind of giving back some like information and education and stuff like that. So you can have your magic, you can have your fun, but like if I think about, I guess to say poorly, like the negative impact of like the Disney princess syndrome, you know, how that could impact has impacted our generation with like dating and love and expectations and stuff like that. It's nice to have a shift away from that to give to children growing up now. Yeah.
Like for me, I always remember, like at Blue Sky, I remember like Donnie one time asked me, one of the story leads, he was like, oh, like what are some of your favorite movies and shows like that? There was a female protagonist, like not like a side character, you know, like what were your favorites growing up? And I remember just like glitching out. Because I couldn't think of any that were like the main protagonist. There were a couple, like Wild Thornberrys was a big one for me, As Told by Ginger. And then it was like Ghibli. So for me, it's like getting this film and like, yeah, like the stakes are lower and like it isn't like your typical big animated movie and it's not your typical like Disney film or even your typical Pixar film, I guess. And it's just like, where has this been? Like,
so we just needed her to be here, needed her to get here, like, you know, exactly. And she's here now.
Yeah.
And I really hope that on different levels that creatives like her and, you know, that are as different to what we've been experiencing as the norm, quote, quote, are really given the opportunities to tell stories.
Yeah.
Because like, look at our inner child or whatever, how happy they are.
Look at
our adult selves are so happy about all this stuff. And it's like, it makes me really, it's like stuff like this that makes me hopeful for the industry.
Yeah.
And it's also important to say that the leadership team was all women, you know, so that was very impressive. They had, you know, a little sprinkle of like sexuality, diversity in there, a little bit of racial diversity, some, you know, parents, some not parents, some expecting, like everyone at kind of different points in their womanhood journey, if you will. So that was pretty cool. And I aspire to be on similar productions to that. I also really want to experience like a predominantly Black production just for myself. That's my intersection. Yeah. So I'm this is like gave me a little bit of hope.
Yeah.
Not that I'm losing hope, but like, you know.
No, this definitely went on my list of like things I wish I wrote, like in like a motivating way, but also in just like a God damn it, like could I ever make something this good? Like
there's a lot of maids out there. Yeah. Like for me, again, just my race plays a big part of like my early 2000s experience. Yeah. So I was very dialed into like the urban culture, which was just the equivalent of whatever Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera was doing. I love them too, but there were also the black versions of them that were, if not maybe better, or comparable to say the least, doing their stuff. So like, I would love to see a black version of Turning Red, because that would just drive me more insane.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, for me, it was interesting because I grew up in a town that was pretty much like half white, half Asian. And then it was like, I mean, obviously I don't look Latino, but like, and then there were a couple of us in there and a couple of like brown and black people, like non-Asian. And it was like, for me, it was like my main friend group at this age were like all Asian girls. So for me, it was like, I had gotten that early exposure to like a lot of like that stuff that she drew from. And like, like my exposure to like anime and manga like came from these kids whose like families would send them stuff from abroad, or like they'd go to Chinatown in New York City. And so for me, it was like, oh, like I wouldn't have even have related to this as much if I hadn't like lived where I lived in particular.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think in just comparing your experience to mine is that like in my elementary school, I was in a more diverse neighborhood. Had I continued with the junior high in that neighborhood, I would have been exposed to anime and manga maybe differently, which could have led to me embrace it a bit more beyond Pokemon and like Sailor Moon. And Digimon, that was my threshold. And I was like, I'm good, those three. But my junior high experience was in a predominantly black neighborhood, black school. So I've said before, that was its own culture shock. And then to go back to high school in like another eclectic area and being around everyone again. And if not, that's when I got more exposed in high school to like what the Spanish kids were into. So I'm learning about Aventura and like, you know, the bachata, and like everyone's in love with like this group and they won't stop singing their songs and like taking over our high school. It was like the different clusters. There was like, yes, the Spanish kids had their stuff. I don't know what the Asian kids were listening to. And then the black kids were all like 50 Cent and Beyonce. And then it was like whoever Paramore also was like heavy, you know. So I would just like, we need more of, I'm looking forward to more millennial experiences being put on the big screen.
Oh yeah, I think this is like, that's like the thing that like, for us, it's so obvious that even if somebody told like the same, not even the same story, but like the same story from a different point of view, like you would get such radically different stories.
Exactly.
I like hope to God that execs don't see this and be like, well, they already did a girl coming of age film. We like, you know, that's done, you know, where I'm like, no, like that is not.
It can't be, because then you have the East Coast is different from the West Coast, is different from the South and the Midwest, all that same time period. It's all just different. So
like, I'm like, there's a million different ways to convey girlhood rage. Like a red panda is just one. Like
right. I mean, yes. And it's just really, like I said, interesting, and it's going to be fun because we grew up with all those like 80s coming of age stories, and we weren't a part of that time, but that's just also what we kind of thought was going to happen. And then in reality to what we actually experience now, we get to share that. And it's not so much about sharing it for kids, I think, as much as it is like just us being able to share experiences with each other now as this particular generation.
And like
that's of the storytelling age. Yeah. Well, we're winding down. So, I mean, if you don't have any other thoughts, I just want to actually give you, just in case you do.
Honestly, not really. I've been meaning to like listen to the score because I know the guy who did the score is like a very well-known person. And the little bit I've heard, I'm just like, oh, I need to like spend time with the score.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And
well, yeah, I'll thank you again for joining me on kind of short notice, but being down for it. And I know this is super easy for you because it's like you get to podcast but not have any of the responsibilities of the podcast. So I appreciate it. Would you like to share if people want to learn more about you?
I mean, if you want to, I'm very active on Twitter at Anim Complex.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Since you said Twitter, I actually have things to read. I almost shut down the episode. Oh, no, because I specifically asked for these things.
Yes, you did. I remember seeing that.
Yes. So, I'm going to have some editing to do. That's fine. So first is Obscure Delusions from Instagram. She said, Turning Red was so good. I don't think I've ever seen puberty for girls done that well in an animated movie. May secretly drawing the boy she liked in an all anime style was so great. Magical girl heart eyes brings back all the feels. I love the nostalgia. So cute, so precious. Ashley Janae Art from Instagram said, I sobbed for 2 hours after watching it. It was so good. Heartfelt, deeply relevant, even as a coming of age story. I always feel strongly about the animation, but so glad there was no singing. In short, I had big feelings in response to the movie being about big feelings.
Oh yeah, so, I cried too, like absolutely.
I think I'm broken because I did not cry.
No, different people process things differently.
But I really did like it and enjoy it. So this is from Odd Nerd on Twitter, who says, I never thought Pixar could top Ratatouille, but is it Domi or Dami?
I think it's Domi.
Domi. But Domi, she and her team just rewrote the game with Turning Red. Animation, cinematography, art direction, lighting, camera work, all at the top of Pixar games, but the head and heart of this movie are unsurpassed. 10 out of 10. Here's a thread. So Turning Red feels like the first absolutely new thing from Pixar in a long time. Is Domishi the youngest person to ever helm a Pixar movie, along with being the first solo female director? The energy just radiates out of this film. I never thought Pixar would make a horny Canadian anthropomorphic period parable about boy bands starring a red panda and her crew, but they really did it. And it's as outstanding and weird as that sounds. The lighting and animation are both a revelation. Pixar gets a bad rap sometimes for being too naturalistic and samey with their style, both in design and animation, but not this time around. Poppy where it needs to be, lifted shadows pushed to the blue to contrast that red all over. All of that is great, but its heart lies in the authenticity of the lead and her relationship to her friend group. This story couldn't have been made by anyone other than this director and her team, and for that, I applaud Pixar for making it possible. It's also stupid funny. There are some great lines, but it's not just with the dialogue either. It's got visual comedy in spades, like the best early Edgar Wright filmmaking. Ooh, so I'm just going to take a little breather, let you digest that. I have one more thread. What do you feel about some of those things?
That was like a beautiful thread.
Oh, okay. So next, this is the last one. It is, I'm clicking the wrong things. It's another thread. Oh, did I? It looks like I got the same thing. Okay. Bear with me. I must have this screenshot somewhere. Screenshots. This one. Okay. So this is from Odera Igbokwe. And forgive me if I'm pronouncing anything incorrect. So this says, Turning Red's most culturally authentic moment that is so true of 2002 Toronto and 2022 animation is how omnipresent Black culture can be. The constant the dance moves, etc., and yet Black characters are simply set dressing, spices to be blended into the palette. The entire time I watched the film, I couldn't help but think, there are many children who are put off by this movie, but for all the wrong reasons. The animation was a delight, though. The rethinking of a big bad villain was fun, and the in-between of genres very 2020s in a fun way. But I couldn't help but think that I would have to have a very nuanced conversation if I were to show Black kids in this film. The sad thing is that this is all reflective of a lot of non-Black people's communities and friend groups. You can live in an incredibly diverse city, but Blackness is just a culture to be siphoned from as opposed to a communal soul that is created by actual living Black folks. I feel like the 90s and early 2000s were full of eye-roll worthy tokenship, oh girl, snap, sassy black friend gestures and caricatures. But now the landscape is just, oh, that's internet slang. That's just slang language, which results in these gestures on non-black creators and a specific erasure of black fleshed out characters with agency or even a few lines, especially from black women, girls, femmes, and even further if you add colorist casting into the mix. So I thought that was a very weighted and yet concise and direct criticism of the film. I feel, and I talked about this briefly with Ashley, who I read her stuff earlier, was that like to a certain extent, just as black people that enjoy animation, the same way as women that like listen to rap, you kind of have to turn off your brain to the misogyny. You turn off your brain to the fact that there's like black culture sprinkled without black people participating. So I didn't really acknowledge that or harp on it or really feel any way about that, because I was like, well, I can identify with this film in like other ways or capacities. Yeah. But knowing that you are an ally of many people, of many intersections, how do you feel about that comment?
Oh, no, I feel like I saw that one too, and I totally got what they were saying. And I think that's like an ongoing conversation. And I know it is like a really interesting intersection with like a lot of Asian culture and like appropriating blackness and black culture. I know that's like a weird like dichotomy in those two, where I feel like with like Latino culture and like black culture, there's a lot more of a Venn diagram. Yes. There's a lot of like shared ancestry. Yeah, I don't know. For me, it was interesting because it was like, I lived in a diverse town, but there still weren't any black kids in my school until I went to high school. So for me, it was one of those things where it was like, unfortunately, that does happen, even again in a diverse place. And I kind of was like, I guess this was Domi's like story. And for me too, it's the kind of thing where, I don't know, I kind of felt like there weren't really Latinos, or I don't know what Tyler was. And it was kind of like, this was like her childhood. And I don't know, like if she lived in like kind of a more like Chinatown part of Toronto, that like, it just wasn't something that she wanted to center on like a mostly Asian group of friends. And like, yeah, I kind of feel like curious if like those conversations came up at all.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, go first.
I was gonna say like, it is indicative too, like that is a good point about like so much of like boy bands and so much of culture back then is like driven by black culture, where it's like American culture is black culture. I feel like I've heard that like sentiment. Yeah. And it's like only recently are people like aware of that more. Like, I don't know, where it's like, it's always been true.
Yeah. Netflix has a show about like pop culture. It's like a docuseries, and they have an episode about boy bands. And it's like, for me, it was like the first time I actually saw like Backstreet Boys and NSYNC acknowledge the fact that Boyz II Men was their entryway really to being these mega superstars. Yeah. Because actually in the 90s, Boyz II Men was the boy group, which had crossed over into pop. Yeah. But then they were like, yeah, but let's make it white. And then, unfortunately, the success of Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, also just because they were younger and it was more appropriate for teenage girls to like lust over them, it just kind of ended Boyz II Men's career, unfortunately. Yeah. So, we do look at and point to those two groups a lot, but a lot of people would not have even known, because we were also kids, that this was actually what opened the door for them, And then I guess also in the way that I probably didn't feel too bad about like the whole race thing was like, there was a black kid in the group in Fort Town. So I was like, man, I guess that's enough for me. But as we've been saying, this feels really much like her story and not like trying to be so politically correct and making sure you appeal to everybody. And I also really don't feel like offended by it. Whereas, for instance, Over the Moon, I was really turned off by the rapping. I felt like it could have just been anything. Yeah. But I was like, I don't know why we had to throw that in there. Do they have to rap? You know?
It is weird too. Like, again, it's like so much of K-pop is like Black culture. And it's like, I think a lot of like the producers and songwriters that currently write for K-pop, I think a lot of them were like, you know, Black producers and whatnot who wrote for Black artists here at like decades ago. And now they're doing it over there. And like the costuming, the dance moves, like the performativeness, it's so much of it. Sometimes it's kind of like, I'm like, I don't think you guys even like the disconnect of like where your influences are from is like weird.
It is weird. So I just want to thank, I just have to say this too. I did get permission from everybody to read this on the show. So no one's being blindsided by this or anything like that. And I appreciate everyone for letting me read their tweets and comments on the show. So now we are actually ending the episode. I would like to thank Jen so much for joining me. Jen, can you share just your Twitter handle where people can read your kind of blurbs as they come about all things that's related to animation?
I'm on Twitter at AnimComplex. I was like, Animation Complex was too long.
Yeah, Twitter was hating on you.
Yeah, you can also find me at animationcomplex.com as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jen.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Y'all fake bullied me into this episode, but I'm very happy to have done it because I had a great time.
Yeah.
And I got to see Jen.
Yeah.
So, bye.